Probably were like second time. It says character and some it's not today on the time.
All right, everybody. Let's get started. 1, 2, 3. Here we go. All right. So, what do you want to learn today?
Nothing.
I'm sorry.
You know, every place.
You never. Did I say that out loud? All right.
What's the pages?
Yes, you're only supposed to have the first 2 pages because there's nothing we're going to talk about. Yeah. There's one thing on the 3rd page, but it's a disclaimer more than anything. All right. So, who understands what's going on with commission? I mean, it's pretty straightforward, and it's just important to know how it's showing up in the document. So basically, what happened is we this color, but anyway, we have compensation. We have a buyer's agent, we have a listing agent, we have a seller, and we have a buyer. How it's always been paid, those times, always negotiable, was the seller got all of the compensation, or would collect the compensation, pay it to the listing agent would then pay the buyer.
Right.
That's theoretically how it happened.
Simplified.
Physically never happened, hasn't happened that way in 20 years, right? You never had this guy that cut a check to that guy. Like it was just divvied out on the HUD.
Well, in Texas, they did.
Correct. South Carolina, they haven't, right, in a while. So then what happened is we decoupled and said, all right, now we have options. Well, we always had the option where the buyer pays it to the buyer's agent, the seller can pay it to the buyer's agent, everybody can pay it to everybody. There's always different ways to do it.
Pay it forward.
Great. The argument of this, which I agree with, is we made all these changes because of the lawsuit. We didn't make a lot of changes on our forms in South Carolina because, quite frankly, we have fairly progressive forms and always have, right? We disclosed more, gave more options, and said that's a good thing. The challenge with the antitrust attorneys that were hired, and they came back and they said there's a big problem here because there was this $6+ billion settlement in a lawsuit, $5 billion settlement in a lawsuit, based on you two
Keeping the money.
colluding about the money. So you all got in a room together, created a document on how to disperse the money between you two.
Right.
That's a terrible idea. Valid point. So SCR, South Carolina Association of Realtors, said, cool, we're going to remove that option there. So the buyer's agent now has the opportunity, and the listing agent now has the opportunity to be paid by the seller. The buyer can pay the buyer's agent, and the seller can pay the buyer's agent. This cannot happen. That's it in a nutshell. That's just what happened. Okay. Now, so this can happen in 2 ways. You have a comp agreement between the seller and the buyer's agent. You have a buyer agency agreement between the buyer and the buyer's agent. And you have concessions from the seller to the buyer, right? Which really only help enforce this. Okay. Again, trying to simplify it as much as possible. Over time, it'll become a lot worse. Right. So, question so far.
Until it changes.
Until it changes.
I
I don't think there are any more changes that can happen, but careful what you say. Because that's a valid. So what we're going to talk about today is how this shows up in the listing agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really kind of it. So what I only have the first 2 pages in front of you because that's really only the relevant part. So it starts on the bottom of page 1 where it says listing broken compensation. And we're going to, like in most contract classes, we're just going to read what it says because that's the best way to do it. Broker's compensation for services rendered is solely a matter of negotiation between the broker and the owner and is not set by law, fixed, controlled, suggested, recommended, or maintained by the board association, the MLS, or by any person or party in the listing agreement. Let me be very clear. That does not mean that you cannot set your own standard for your business. You can absolutely go in there and say, Trenton, my standard for my business is 3%. And that's how it is negotiable, but for me, this says it's negotiable, but my standard is 3%. So it says, well, I want to do 2.5%. You then have the beauty to say, fantastic. I'd like to refer you to AJ Furlano with Keller Williams. He'd be glad to take it for 2.5%. Right? You can still set that standard and not do it. Okay. Broker's commission, listing broker's commission will be paid by the owner in funds as a condition of the sale. Listing compensation is next page, exactly a certain amount. So if you're listing a property and let's say it's a $2 million property and they're saying, hey, I don't really think that I should be paying you $6,000 or $60,000, I'll pay you 25. And you've agreed to it, you can put it in there. That's option A.
Wait, have you come across that?
Yeah.
Clerk's office?
Nah, not often, but yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you will. It really comes off in less, more specific situations.
Yeah.
Like, I just bought a $2 million house. I just bought a house from you, and I'm going to sell my house now. So instead of me paying you whatever 3% would be, I'll pay you the flat. So that could be done. Okay, got it. The second one, this second one is a percentage.
Yeah.
Okay, where this has changed is originally you would put a total percentage here. And then part of that would be addressed later in the listing agreement to say that would go to a buyer's agent. So you would put 6% and then later, and that's the total commission that was paid. And then later you would put 3% being paid to the buyer's agent. Buyer's agent compensation is nowhere addressed in here at all because it's no longer paid between you as the listing agent or broker and the buyer's broker. Okay, so it's just the seller side. This is just what you would put in here. And so for the example today, it's gonna be 3%. So you put 3% in here. Other, you could write in if you have a bonus structure or something along in there, that's what our other would be. It's always a question, okay? So that's the first part of the change. Questions about that?
So there is no acknowledgement, legally speaking, in terms of buyer agency compensation. So you as the listing agent would have to be crystal clear in having that discussion with your seller to say, hey, Mr. Seller, you owe 3% according to this document. However, provided that you want your house to be more applicable or increase the buyer's eligibility, I would advise you to also offer buyer agency commission. But it's all verbal, correct? Until you get a compensation agreement from a buyer.
It's technically all verbal until you got a compensation agreement before too.
Okay.
But conceptually what you're saying, yes and no. There is on the top of page 3, which I'll show you when we get there, y'all have in front of you, a disclosure that would cause that conversation. The point that AJ is making that I think is super, super important, and this is the part about this that scares me, is you do have to be crystal clear that just because I'm not paying it,
Doesn't mean you don't.
they're going to ask for it.
Right.
On that.
Yes.
But they have the ability to change the amount every offer that comes.
They always have that.
Um,
They always have that, because your listing agreement before said, I authorize Margaret up to 3%.
Right.
Right, but I don't honestly put the change in your hands.
Okay.
But to answer your question, yes. And that's probably what we're gonna see happen way more. That's an unintended, like, we're seeing it right now on a couple of negotiations that now that it's not preset at all. Sellers they're being a little more hard nosed about it. And they're going to be.
The full price it's actually.
Yeah. And let's be honest, from a consumer transparent point of view, I get it. And that's what we had to allow. Okay. So continuing going down on this paragraph at page 2, listing broker compensation shall be earned due and payable when the purchase options, change leads and trades assigned by the owner. However, shall fail to refuse to sell the property, or if owner shall fail or refuse to complete the sale of the property under a written agreement. Broker's full fee shall be due and payable. So this is the same disclosure saying, hey, if you sign a contract and you default on it, you can still owe it. Pay all costs, that's there. If the property is sold within blank days of the expiration, that hasn't changed. All that stays the same in there. You then have the next part of this, which is the additional fee. This is an optionality that they created. I don't know why you wouldn't personally just put it all in the first fee. But some people want to have fancy transaction fees and all that, and that's fine. No judgment. I just think it makes it more confusing. But here's where you could put an additional fee, right? There's an administrative fee that you would charge of blank. And it's either paid no later than blank calendar days at the signing of the contract, which would be like a retainer fee. Not a terrible idea. Like if I'm gonna go spend a couple $1,000s on staging and getting stuff ready, and I want to maybe have that paid for.
Non-refundable deposit.
Yeah, it's basically would be paid upfront. That would be paid directly to the brokerage, just like the commission would. And then you check off if it's the sole fee, if it's credited or not credited. Credit would mean, I'm charging you 3% up here, but you're gonna pay me $1,000 now, which means at closing, then the difference between the two would happen at closing. Or it would be in addition to. Okay. Any questions about this? Like, again, this is not super complicated. I mean, it's pretty straightforward, but I think that's what's throwing us a little bit, is we want it to be a lot more
Yeah,
complicated.
it seems a lot more simple language.
It is a lot more simple.
So that's.
Yeah, it's a lot more simple, yeah. All right, so the big thing that this uncovers, though, is what happens in an unrepresented buyer situation. Because before, if you were charging 6% and a buyer came in unrepresented and you didn't have any sort of stipulation in your listing agreement, you got full 6%. So what this does in section 6 is it allows you the opportunity to do that, which basically says here, in the event a buyer who is unrepresented, well, I should say compensation for assisting an unrepresented buyer, then you have the right to charge more than that 3%. So in here is where you would put, if your policy was that I take the full 6%, and here you would put 3%. Say, okay, if someone comes in without an agent that I'm paying, then I get 6%. Can be done.
In that situation, you have to incorporate some type of transactional brokerage agreement with that buyer.
You would want to do that anyway. Yeah, you'd want to do that anyway. I mean, you're not required, the buyer's not required.
They're automatically.
They're automatically a transaction broker. Our policy is, though, in any unrepresented situation, is to have a transaction brokerage agreement signed. Don't die on that hill. I mean, if they're just refusing, if they're an attorney, and they're just like, I'm gonna represent myself, I'm not signing anything, like, don't die. They're by default in South Carolina. I document it, put something in your notes, say, hey, Delisha is a buyer who knows everything and doesn't want to.
Context is if you're showing your listing to an unrepresented buyer and they refuse to sign anything.
Yeah, I think I think that goes into a kind of the argument that Vince made that Compass is saying. I think that tends to get into like teetering in your fiduciary responsibility. If I'm a seller and I find out that you met a buyer at the house but didn't show them because they wouldn't sign a form that your association requires, I'm like, get out of here, get the buyer in the house. Like, so
Well, that if they're not willing to sign anyway.
you know that they're not willing.
Well, in the example, in the real life situation, I had signed the LLR acknowledgement
Yeah,
Okay.
and that was all I cared.
and honestly, that's why there's an argument that the LR acknowledgement should be that agreement.
Sure.
But it's really an acknowledgement. So, but yeah, I mean, that's one of those where you get into a tricky situation, which is, Constance made the point in the meeting too. It's like, NAR caused a lot of these problems that are pissing clients off. But the motive to do it was pure, like the motive to do all of it, I get.
Should put it on the agents who aren't doing, I don't think you can not mail. I think you should put it on the agents who just say, this is my fee, sign it, and they're the ones who did not do their jobs the way they should have.
Maybe. I think it's two separate arguments though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a consumer, when I was in Pennsylvania, and there was a consumer notice.
Yeah.
And that is the first, that basically says, don't tell me anything. It was a great idea.
Mhm.
Don't tell me anything financial. I don't want to know. And
That's
that's
what the LLR.
well, they had that once you went into, but if you had an open house, stepping into the open house, they had to say, don't tell me you're selling your house. Don't tell me you have this much money. Don't tell me, don't tell me anything,
yeah.
because that's when it starts.
Yeah. All right, questions about this? This is in a nutshell, everything we had to talk about.
But you didn't give us the note that says the thing about.
Making sure we wrap up the commission part first.
Okay.
What related but unrelated? Can we also talk about the purchase agreements? Because there's a couple things in there that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, we can bring that in here in a second, yes.
So the only thing that is addressed here is the listing agent's commission.
Mhm.
So as far as if a buyer's agent calls me and said, I'm gonna show your listing at 123 Main Street, are you offering buyer agency, buyer broker commission. Where is that in here that I can say yes?
You're not.
So clear.
Okay, so
We're not.
say,
The agent's not. Now, that point, this goes into the next part. So
Okay.
you don't have this in front of you, but on the next page, there's just two disclosures. Number one, 7, the buyer broker compensation says the listing broker, and I'm just reading right off the screen. Listing broker is not authorized to compensate any other buyer broker. Owner can choose to directly negotiate compensation with the buyer broker, or can instead choose to directly negotiate transaction costs with the buyer. So this is what will trigger the conversation to say, Jackie, here's what I know. 9 times out of 10, the buyers are going to want you to cover their agent's commission, and they're going to ask for it. So as we prepare to price your house, here are some of the projected closing costs you're gonna have. You've got my fee for 3%. I think a wise move would be to factor in 3% to the buyer's agent. I think, in my professional opinion, it is most competitive to offer 3%. And I would encourage you to offer that out from the beginning, because it will create less bandwidth to negotiation, or use of bandwidth to negotiation, and be best case scenario for you. And then anything else the buyer asks for concessions, you can ask. Understand it's negotiable, you can make whatever decision you want. That's my recommendation.
So if they're willing to do that, can we have them sign the compensation agreement? Yes.
You can have it.
We'll have it on file. So if somebody calls and does it, we have it on file. They sign the contract. and
Yeah.
so-
I mean, that's a clean, I mean,
That's a good.
that's a clean area. Now, the challenge on that, if you do that, is you've got to make sure you understand that, well, and again, that's even still negotiable. You can have that in there and send it out. But if somebody, you know, if you've got a $500,000 house and a buyer comes in and submits a $400,000 offer, your seller may be like, I ain't paying 3% on this. I'll go up to X and pay 2%, and you can amend that. It's not even need to be amended. You just do a new one. It's not a bilateral situation at that point. From a best practice standpoint, I would say that would be what I would do. I would sit down with the seller and say, my recommendation is that you offer out 3%.
So they do the listing agreement and they do the compensation agreement at the same time, and then you.
Yeah.
So that go where?
It would not. It's a totally separate agreement.
Two different.
Two completely different things. Because again, the compensation agreement is between the seller and the buyer.
so what do we say? They are currently offering.
Yeah, I mean, they say,
That's it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's schools of thought. There's schools of thought that are saying, why would you go ahead and preset that without knowing the details of it, or the quality of the buyer's agent? No, I mean, maybe. I think we're overthinking it.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I would respond with negotiable up to 2.5 or 3 or whatever the discussion I had.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
because of that reason, as we've had,
Yeah.
I need 10,000 in closing, and we're giving you 15,000 under asking price. And then my first conversation is, this is exactly why.
Yeah.
Up to is the discussion, because you.
Right.
Well, I think the up,
To my seller.
I agree that the up to was the discussion, but how it was written was at the discrepancy of the listing agent, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. But dangerous.
Also, in the context of this chain with the additional compensation for the assisting unrepresented buyer, historically, if we brought it, if there was an unrepresented buyer, we would essentially just say we dual sided it, because we, in theory, did. It just very explicitly says that the broker will not represent buyer, but will facilitate the completion of necessary forms. So this is not dual agency.
Well, again, none of it is specific to, let me see if I got the right one to pull up. I don't think I did.
Section 6.
And now I was looking at this.
Oh, no, I think it's whole.
Yeah, that's another.
So it is.
I didn't have it on there. Say that again. Sorry, I was trying to look at.
Well, it says in section 6, in discussion about the additional compensation for assisting an unrepresented buyer,
Yeah.
about the second to the bottom of that first paragraph, in this scenario, will not represent buyer, but will facilitate the completion of necessary forms and provide comfortable levels for
Yeah, so in that case, because they're a customer at that point. So, but if the buyer in that point said, hey, I want to be represented, or if it was a buyer that you already had,
They would need to.
then you go back to this situation here where you as the buyer's agent
already negotiated.
to have
A buyer agency.
a buyer agency agreement that says this, and then your buyer and you discuss, and this is, I mean, in a dual agency situation, this is gonna get kind of hairy.
Right.
Because if you know the seller's already said that he'll pay you 3% unless we negotiate, so that's an interesting one, we'll see how that plays out. But in that case, this would not apply. This fee in section 6 would not apply because it would be paid through the compensation agreement and your buyer's agency agreement.
But what if, I mean, this is my analytical brain here, like, what if it is an unrepresented buyer, but then you wanna be represented, and like, say, like, you already, you know, the seller's bottom line, how do you necessarily recommend to the buyer?
You can't tell them the bottom line.
Right, like, how do you?
Because because again, in dual agencies, you can't share anything that it will adversely affect your client. So by going to the buyer and saying, I know they'll pay me up to 3%, you're adversely affecting the seller. So all you can do at that point is say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, my buyer's agency agreement will pay 3%. I mean, that's why your buyer's agency agreement is important, because you've already got it.
Right.
Your buyer's agency agreement says 3%.
And if it's already an existing buyer, great, we've already had that conversation.
Yeah.
But in a situation where I represent the seller first,
Mhm.
and a buyer that's unrepresented comes in, and I don't, we have to have that.
Yeah, it's a strong argument for getting rid of dual agency.
Yeah.
I mean, for that specific situation.
Probably, and you also have to go back to your seller. And say, now it's dual agency and.
Which they would have already given you permission to do.
Right, it's already in the listing.
Yeah.
Good, but I've done 12 collections, I've done like 10.
Yeah,
So it's not like it's super common.
yeah.
Oh, it also says here, owner after entering into this written agency contract, broker might request a modification in order to act as a dual agent, so that's.
Yeah, you'd ask for it and they would have to do it.
Right.
It's okay.
I know, anyway, let me know if it comes back to you.
Well, wondering, question is, why is it saying additional compensation?
Yeah, wait,
What is that?
because it's additional compensation, because you're only getting 3% right now as a listing agent.
Right,
So if you wanna earn more, if there's no other agent involved, then you would put that there.
okay, so that, I don't need that if you're gonna already discuss that 3% earlier.
No, you do need it, because the 3% is the 3%. You're paid as the listing agent 3%. This is if someone calls you on the sign, says, we'll just keep it very simple. I don't have an agent, I don't want an agent, I just wanna buy the house. Then you would say in that case, that's totally fine, you write it up. This is where you would have pre-negotiated with your seller. If that happens, I'm not only because I'm going to be doing more work. I don't wanna just have 3%, I wanna have 3% plus whatever you put.
And that would have been like what the variable, we would have checked if we were still doing commission,
Correct.
that's where the variable and commission would have been
And
checked.
now that really doesn't apply anymore.
Doesn't.
No, that's why they're probably addressing
It
it.
doesn't, which is another argument why it was good to decouple it.
So, alright. This makes it interesting that it's asking the seller to pay that, because that situation happened to me last year where I had an unrepresented buyer. And I made them, the buyer, pay a transaction fee.
You could
So
still
I
do
feel like
that.
it was unfair to the seller to.
One could
pay-
argue that, because if you signed a,
Prenup.
or a transaction agreement with a brokerage.
Cause I told him, I'm like, I'm happy to, help you out here, but like, without an agent, there are things that I'm gonna have to do for you that require work. And like, here's a transaction fee. And they had no problem paying it, cause it was not that, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good clarification if you have it. Yeah, it's a good clarification if you have the transaction brokerage agreement. If they're gonna pay you on that, it's a good, I'll get some clarity on how that affects us.
It's actually like, it's unfair to the seller to have to pay that.
Yeah, which, okay, and again, if it'd be a truly unrepresented situation. I get it though, which is what a transaction brokerage agreement would be.
So in that situation, like possibly approaching dual agency, they're unrepresented, they want to be represented, you can't disclose, well, I know the seller is gonna pay.
Mhm.
But can you just say, my fee is 3, yeah, I will try to negotiate with the couple.
Well, that's what your buyer's agency agreement says already. So
You're just still good to say that, because
yeah.
as long as you're not saying, I know they're not.
I think where it gets sticky is for whatever reason, in that case, the seller comes back and says, well, I'm not paying 3. Or I'm not accepting the 3. You can't, and be like, well, I know it well. It's a net at that point. Sure. It's a net. Like, let's be careful that we're not overthinking where it's coming from. And let's just say, like in a situation, so Lynn just had a situation where the listing agent was just they were hell bent on saying you can get the difference in concession. And it was like all back and forth and do this. And it's like, just have the conversation that says, listen, here's the commission. This is what the commission is. Sign off on that. And if your seller at that point does not want to pay more in concessions to cover the commission, then they don't have to. Right? I mean, that to me is the smartest way to go. They didn't listen. They don't care. They're just we're stuck on this amount. I'm like, fine, just put it in the concessions at that point.
I do, but, in the past, I've like charged it one, when different listings, 1% of transactional licensee or whatever they.
Mhm.
So there's a different concept for sitting rule to buy, so I don't like doing this anyway, because I just don't want to be dual agency, but.
It's not dual agency.
That's what I'm saying, but the second part of this is, as Jay said, if they want to be represented. So
Right.
owner who's compensated, let's say 1% for transactional, for an unrepresented buyer. But there's no room if they want to be represented.
Yeah,
So
but
can you do like
that
one?
would be-
Because if they want to be represented, then this is a moot
That would
point.
be a
This is an obsolete paragraph. if they wanna-
Oh, okay, so, I gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's why we're having these discussions, because it's clear until it's not. Right? I mean, it's like,
It's all
yeah.
situation.
Yeah, it's very situational.
Like everything in real estate is a situation, so it's,
This is why I draw this.
yeah.
Because at the end of the day, what the situation you just said, put this person back in play,
Right.
Yes.
right?
Gotcha.
As they come in represented, this person doesn't exist.
Right.
They want to be represented, they're back.
Gotcha,
Regardless of whether those two people are the same,
right.
the role, the characters. Right. All right, anything else on that? Okay. Purchase agreement. What do we want to talk about on purchase agreement? Oh, sorry. Section 8 on this, which you don't have in front of you, but it's up here. Section 8, owner concessions are not required or fixed by law. This is again a good disclaimer to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, you likely are going to be asked. We know statistically you have a 51% chance of buyers wanting to close with you covering concessions. Okay, so this is where it would happen on here. And it would be negotiated in Form 310. The only thing to keep in mind here is whether or not the owner agrees or does not agree to allow the broker to advertise the willingness to negotiate.
And that's all you're allowed to put in the MLS too, is
Yes or no?
willing.
Yeah,
You can't put an amount, right?
correct.
Okay, just want to make sure I'm.
No.
So this is where we.
I don't see amounts too, but that's where I get.
Put that though, in agent notes they've been putting.
They put agent's notes in there, just it'll be flagged. Our MLS is pretty good at policing.
So that's technically not.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we have a separate compensation agreement signed by ourselves,
But-
Yeah.
we should always do yes.
No, I don't know. I don't know. We don't have a corporate stance on this yet. I don't think we should. I don't think you should. I don't understand why you would say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we're going to aggressively market your property. And the first thing we're going to do after that is say, I'm willing to negotiate. Like, make them negotiate. Like, for me, I mean, I guess it says, are you willing? And it says no.
Gotcha.
Then you could argue, well, you did, you lied. That's advertising. Like,
Concessions
so-
anyway. If we get, it's not a compensation, it's not concessions anyway, so it's just like.
correct. Shh. All right, everybody come back in. So in this specific case, I don't know why you would tell a seller to say, yes, please ask for concession. I'm willing to give you money. If you want the money, friggin' ask for it. Like, I don't know why you're gonna advise a seller.
I can go with that,
Check
but
off here.
someone has a operating for buyer agency compensation. Because like I had several last year where they're willing to pay 3%.
Yeah.
The buyer agent only asked for 2.5. That's all they got,
Right.
because that's all they asked for.
Correct. Which is the argument of this. It's like, this is a part of the argument of decoupling. We were pre-negotiating for the buyer's agents, which has been fascinating to watch, whom I feel are pretty talented buyer's agents freak out about this. Because I had one who was incredibly talented, and I've watched be a buyer's agent at a very high level for years, was like, well, now I'm gonna have to have an awkward discussion about commission. The fact that you're saying that is part of the argument. Like, I mean, that's just all there is to it. So and that was the argument the sellers had. It's like, you're pre-negotiating for someone who could be a crap agent. Sorry. It's like,
Often is, well,
Well-
it's not fair to say, but.
yeah, so just that goes into a lot of the issues there. So let's bring up the purchase. Any more on the listing agreement? All right, I'm gonna bring up the purchase agreement. Let's see if this is gonna work. So, no. She didn't trust me. I don't blame her. Um, let's see. Sorry, I gotta go grab Christian really quickly to do this.
Okay, we're talking about this.
It will be quick though, don't worry.
And then it gets started.
And I'm even trying to find the part that I want to talk about.
So,
There was one part in here that I was around with yesterday, and I was, this is different, and I don't think, I don't understand it, now I can't find it.
uh,
So, you know, first you put it in your hands and then. So. It's really.
I'm sure, I'm serious, but that one's really complicated to read, that's why I read through it again.
so do you know it definitely isn't?
I'm pretty sure that's where it's.
So,
Yeah.
Anything else?
yeah,
Pretty much.
I'm sorry, I should have called you.
So that's fine.
Take it easy.
Thanks for the.
Challenges, not that way.
That's a login too.
I know,
Not login.
right?
Well,
This is.
depends on this tool that has to do it. There, if you want, there's no. And you have to financing.
It's okay, I star everything, you know what I do? 310?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. And logging as well.
See, come on, Ryan.
Girl, yeah.
Fine, we're fine.
You also know how you get it, right?
I know, but then I have to put my nerd's number and password, and that's not saved on here. Know thyself. All right, here we go. Okay, so now let's jump to section 6 of the contract. So in the event this amount does not cover what this amount says, let's say this said 3% and they're only paying 2, you got a 1% delta. So then or you have all of it, that's it. The seller can then pay concessions to the buyer that would then cover. Okay, how that is covered is in section 6, and then you have part 4 of this that basically says seller will pay the buyer's transaction costs not to exceed whatever that amount is.
Now, does that amount need to be the dollar amount of
It
that?
has to be a dollar amount. Does have to be, so you have to calculate.
Now, this. Where I'm getting confused on concessions is when you want them to cover, closing costs, they. And also some for higher industry compensation.
Mm.
Do you add that all together? for
Yes.
that line?
Yes.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
then you do option A.
Yeah, so let's just say, let's say this number here, that you've agreed to get paid, well, I'm just gonna use hard numbers instead of percentages, right, is 10,000.
Okay.
They're willing to pay you 5,000. So you now have a delta of 5,000. Everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Okay, so you're only getting half of it, so now you have to get 5,000 from the concessions. You can do that one of two ways. You can say, I want 5,000. And the buyer says, cool, I'm paying cash, I don't need any additional money, closing costs. There you go. Or they want more, let's say they want an additional 20,000. So you would then add whatever the closing concessions that the actual buyer needed to this, and then you would ask for 25,000 in consent.
Okay.
20,000 would go, honestly, 25,000 would technically all go to the buyer, and then 5 of that would then be paid to you on the buy side.
Right.
Now, the only problem with this is if you're getting a mortgage, there are certain mortgages that don't allow you to get.
Not, yeah,
So it is an issue if you're asking towards closing costs, so you just need to make sure to talk to your mortgage broker.
correct.
And make sure that that covers it, because otherwise they'll say, then, because you get screwed.
Yeah, I've not run into that, FHA and VA pivoted really quickly with this, which was good, yeah. And I have not run into any where there's been a capped amount that causes the.
So high these days that it.
Yeah.
Like 4% or something is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so here's the deal. Option A and B would then say, yes, the seller or the seller agrees to allow up to a certain amount. In this case, you'd put 5,000. Come back to that. Or they don't allow any of the amount to go, which because then they're gonna say, this guy's not getting any more from me.
Right.
And I'll give you money towards yours, but I don't, I don't want any more than that. We haven't really seen that happen. I don't know why you're gonna start dictating money. What we're seeing is I'm not giving you 25 grand, so 5 of it can go down. I'll give you 5 or 10 and you can do whatever you want with it. But I mean, again, it's all a net gain. And where I see us getting us, meaning these two drama queens. See, y'all are just like, well, it's gotta be exactly her, and it's not, okay, well. He knows that he's already agreed to pay it. So if they're not netting what they want, then you're gonna have to increase the price then.
Right, yeah.
They've got a bottom line, like it's my bottom line. At this price, I'm not paying 25. Okay, fine, I'll give you 500, 5,000. You pay 25? Yes, sure. And they'll do that. If you've had the conversation early on. Which is the challenge. Now, one of the caveats, and goes back to why I said earlier, you shouldn't say that you're willing to negotiate, is because it says right here. The concession cannot go solely to be paid the brokerage compensation if the concession was advertised on the multiple listing service. So if they
They're
did,
annexing it on there though, then this is.
yeah, that's a gray area. Yeah, so then if you said no, then you're fine. You put the full, if you're asking for 5,000, then you can put 5,000 in this line. If they did say yes, we just had this, put 4,999.
I think the reason why they did that probably is because they don't want to hide the commission.
Correct, 100% what it is.
So it's fine.
Yeah,
We'll give you $10,000.
Yeah.
But we can't say it anywhere, so that's,
yeah, and what's interesting is the verbiage here, it says, if the concession was advertised.
Yeah.
What's the concession, an amount?
That's what I'm saying. That's
Yeah,
If they say $10,000,
saying you are or not willing to negotiate.
yeah.
I mean, the rule number one is that everything's.
I can tell you right now that I'll be interested to see how this plays out. In the case where you put 5,000 here and then 4,999 here,
yeah.
I can promise you in every single one of those closings, $5,000 is still on point to it.
Somebody gets the penny, they say, here,
Well,
a dollar.
No, I can tell you the attorney looks at it and says,
Oh,
cool.
that's 5,000.
Yeah.
But
Rounded.
that's speculation.
Well, but I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah. All right, anything else?
Since we're still in this same thing, can we talk about the HOA section too?
Sure. Any other questions about commission? Okay, yeah. This one or,
Yeah, just because like with certain neighborhoods with like capital contributions and this, that, and the other, like Daniel Island, for instance.
yeah, so capital contributions are actually addressed. Where was the cap? Like. Getting confused here in a second.
Well,
Hold on.
that's the thing, I don't think it's in there anymore.
It is.
It
Yeah, I
is.
would say I read it.
But
Hold please.
It's in the.
It's when the HOA stuff.
It's actually, sorry,
Right there.
there it is. Nope.
wait,
It's
wait.
back up.
Transaction costs?
Yeah, I think it might be transaction costs.
No.
No, it's own stuff.
It says HOA dues and assessments are not considered transaction costs and are addressed by the closing attorney as needed per.
Okay, yeah. I mean, this
Okay.
is for assessments. This does not apply to HOA due member fees. Select one of the following. The special assessments approved prior to closing. And then responsible for the portion of special approved prior to closing.
I just had an issue with this because I have a condo downtown. There's the flood insurance is it's an assessment. And my seller wanted
Capital contributions right there.
Where,
Section C,
that's transaction.
3C.
Okay. Any costs similar to transaction fees, capital contributions, working capital. So the following costs in addition to costs above will be considered, there it is.
okay, see.
Seller.
It's transaction.
Yeah. You could select it there though.
Yeah.
And if you don't, then it's considered seller.
Yeah.
Which I love that they put that in.
I do too, that's.
I mean, I'm a listing agent.
Yeah.
but-
Well, that's not, I'm trying to make sure.
Yeah. I know, I was like, I'm having stroke, like, what's happening here? Yeah, so this is where that is there. Now, your assessments does come up and you're gonna have a lot of these and saying, okay, here's who's gonna pay for it. And that's gonna be situationally specific. Because if the assessment was to fix something and it was, or to take care of something that the seller enjoyed or the seller benefited from, then I would say that's why the seller should pay. But if it's an assessment for future stuff, which a lot of these are, then I totally understand where the seller's like, that's why I'm selling.
Go ahead, I'm out here.
Yeah, so that becomes a one that's missed.
Well, I think
Be
about it
careful.
because of like Daniel Island, Tucson Creek, those neighborhoods that have the association, like
Most of the fire
capital contribution.
Yeah, so that's addressed back in,
And
yeah, that's addressed up here.
like sometimes the seller's like, well, I know that's a big number
Right.
for buyers, so I'll cover half of it.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah, well, and also understand when you're starting to see that this is a big area, whereas the listing agents, you need to make sure this, I always use this specific thing as an example of the importance of making sure you know your role in this. And your role is to make sure the seller confirms one way or the other if there's a contribution fee. Because a lot of these Park West, a lot of Mount Pleasant neighborhoods, when we all bought them in there, none of them had it.
But they do now.
They do now.
Yeah.
And listen, if one was put in Brickyard, I would have no friggin' clue as a seller. Cause I haven't been in an HOA meeting, read the minutes in 20 years I've done the house. Like, I don't. So if I sold it right now,
You wouldn't have a clue.
I wouldn't have a clue. And then all of a sudden, if it's a $2,500 fee and this was my age and my agent was like, no, there's no, or I wasn't, like, that sucks.
Yeah, but what's really difficult about that, as a listing agent, when your seller doesn't know, like, it's not that they're trying to disclose, to hide it, or they just don't know.
Right.
You don't have to then pay for the estoppel fee, basically, to get the documents. to find-
Wait a minute. The buyer's agent should call the agent and say, is there a I understand that. You're saying a buyer's agent, and I just want to bring this up, is that I just sold it, but we have a contract case. That it was an assessment for the flood insurance. So they didn't put they took the flood insurance out of the HOA fee. And they made it an assessment, it's a yearly assessment. It's $5,000 because it's downtown. So my seller was upset because she wanted to be prorated at closing. I said, no, because it's not flood insurance, it's an assessment. And it was assessed before you sold it. So therefore, it's an assessment, not a proration for flood insurance. So that's something also, like my HOA is also doing the same thing for the flood insurance. Rather than upping the HOA fee, they're making a one-time fee.
But are they doing that every year?
Yes. They do it. So the $5,000, so my list of $800 something.
Two things on this. Number one, I'll always go to paragraph 24.
Right.
Which basically says this is what's not my job. This is a gray area because it doesn't specifically state this in here. I think you should facilitate the conversation for your buyers, specifically to the HOA. This is a little sneaky one that people forget about. It's back in paragraph 3.
Yeah, well, that's what due
membership,
diligence.
lease issues, finance.
And I know what you're about to say, because I see it already, but the problem is, if you're the buyer's agent, the HOA will not tell you anything.
Yeah, it's a conflict here.
If you do due diligence, you find out what's.
It's not always that simple though. I get conceptually what you're saying.
Places there are. We think in a contract there should.
Hold on, so it's all go to one.
In the listing agreement, in the buyer contract agreement, it should say you have 10 days to review HOA documents. Because especially here,
Why would you do that when you have due diligence?
well, that should be part of the due
It
diligence,
is,
but.
by default.
Well, it is. I think what she's trying to get at though is, why can't there be some sort of mandate, law, policy, something that those are more easily accessible?
Yeah, maybe.
That a lot of HOAs won't talk to somebody.
Yeah, maybe.
So therefore, it should be the seller should, or the listing agent should ask for the county document because financial.
Good luck.
Is it in the red or the black? I mean, here, when I first moved here, if I didn't know about the peninsula, and if you don't have an agent to know that the peninsula and James Island was like a shit show,
Mhm.
you wouldn't know. And if you're going there and buying it, and you find out, oh, it's the first floor, I have to move out.
That's all the action.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of shoulds in this, but again, that would go back to, this is why some best practices could be, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller,
Yeah.
let's go get the most updated
Absolutely.
Like one of the things we did years ago, and I look back on it now, I'm like, I can't believe we did that. We used to keep an active file folder with all of the HOA docs.
Sneezing, that's.
Well,
When do you update? it? Who's monitoring it?
well,
It's a liability nightmare. It's a terrible idea.
I offer on the same condo that downtown, and we did not know that it said it limits you to 2 50-pound dogs.
Yeah.
And these people had golden doodles that were 60 pounds.
Yeah.
Deal fell apart because. and-
Well, again, that's what due diligence is for, though.
Right.
Those HOA covenants are
Well-
9 times out of 10 public.
Yeah, no, that's what they asked for, but I mean,
well,
before.
they're
Yeah.
supposed to be, but and
Yeah.
technically they are recorded.
Yeah.
That's the one that they first agreed on 82 years ago.
Right, they changed.
Right.
They changed it.
And they don't ever.
Yeah.
But like financials, I mean, is it in the red, is it in the black? Do they have any money?
All part- I mean,
Can you
I'll
get
tell
it?
you,
So here's the deal. Let's zoom back from specifics.
Right.
And if you know that those are particular specifics your buyer has,
Yeah.
then make sure you cover it in due diligence. And if you don't have time, then you extend your due diligence
Right.
or cancel because you don't have the answers. All right, anything else on commissions? Anything else? It's been a long day in this room. I appreciate y'all. I appreciate y'all. Y'all been in here for a while, so thank you so much. Let me know if you have any questions. So we're gonna continue this on this Thursday of the month. We're gonna go back to contract theory though. So what we're gonna go in is basically just covering the Form 310 and going line by line, but not in a boring way, if that's possible. But honestly, seeing what we're seeing is the most recent thing in the last 30 days on all of these. So it's gonna be more of like how we're doing it, how we're handling specific situations, and basically a lot of what ifs. So, all right, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. What Thursday did you say that?
The last Thursday. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Justin.
I should technically probably say the 4th,
Okay.
because if there's a 5th, then yes.
so what I did was I put like 6 signs in the yard. I've got about